October 6th, 2018, Las Vegas. Inside the T-Mobile Arena, 20,000 people are on their feet. Camera flashes erupt like lightning. The atmosphere isn't just electric, it's volatile. This was never just about a championship belt. It was a collision between two diametrically opposed worlds. In one corner, the notorious Conor McGregor, the master of the mental game, a man who transformed the sport into a global spectacle, who turned press conferences into performance art. In the other, Khabib, the Eagle, Nurmagomedov, a stoic, undefeated shadow from the mountains of Dagestan, a man who let his fists do the talking. Experts called it the most anticipated fight in UFC history. They said you could feel goosebumps just watching them stand in the same cage. Khabib was 26-0. At this level, fighters make mistakes. Khabib didn't even blink. He didn't flinch. He walked forward like a man who had already seen how the movie ends. The build-up had been toxic. Insults directed at faith, family, and country. A metal dolly thrown through a bus window, injuring innocent fighters. Death threats exchanged across continents. But as the referee stood between them, the noise of the world faded into a singular, violent truth. The king was back to reclaim his throne, but the eagle was there to tear it down, brick by brick.
To understand why Khabib could not be broken in Las Vegas, you have to understand Sildi, the remote mountain village where he was forged. Nestled high in the Caucasus, where the air is thin and the winters are brutal, Sildi is a place where comfort is earned, never given. In Dagestan, wrestling isn't a hobby. It is the language of the land. It is how boys become men. Khabib grew up in a traditional household with a big farm. He has spoken about waking up before the sun, carrying heavy bags of tomatoes with his father to sell at the local market. While other children played with toys, his first playground was a wrestling mat. His father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, had built a gym inside their home when Khabib was just 3 years old. It was here that the most famous video in MMA history was recorded, a 9-year-old Khabib wrestling a chained bear cub. It wasn't a stunt, it was a lesson. A lesson in confronting something bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than yourself, and refusing to back down. When the bear bit him, Khabib ran to his father. His father's advice was simple: bite the bear back. Abdulmanap was a military veteran, a decorated judo practitioner, and a master of combat sambo. He wasn't just raising a fighter, he was raising a man who would never know the meaning of the word pressure. He built champions out of mountain air and discipline. If you can wrestle a bear at 9 years old, a human being in 4-ounce gloves is nothing to fear.
By the time Khabib reached the UFC in 2011, he was 16-0 and a 2-time World Combat Sambo champion. The Western world wasn't ready for his style. It wasn't flashy kickboxing, it wasn't pretty jiu-jitsu. It was something the sport had never seen before. They called it the maul. His method was suffocating. He would close the distance, lock his opponent's legs in a vise, trap their arms against their own body, and drain their spirit round by round. Fighters who faced him described it as drowning, a claustrophobic nightmare that no amount of training could prepare you for, because nobody else on earth fought like Khabib Nurmagomedov. His debut against Kamal Shaloris was the blueprint: relentless pressure, smothering control. But his fight against Abel Trujillo was the masterpiece. In just 15 minutes, Khabib took Trujillo down 21 times. He didn't just win the fight, he shattered the all-time record for the most takedowns in a single bout in UFC history. It was a performance so dominant it felt like a different sport entirely. Khabib once explained his philosophy in an interview: sacrifice everything. Sleep, train, eat, repeat. 2 sessions a day were not enough. He would force himself into a third, because when your legs are burning and your lungs are screaming, that is when the real training begins. That was the mentality his father had instilled in him since childhood. Khabib's dominance reached a terrifying peak against Michael Johnson. While pummeling Johnson on the ground, he did something unprecedented. He started talking, not to his opponent, but to the man who controlled his destiny, Dana White, sitting just feet away at cageside. He told White to stop sending him fake contracts. He told him he was coming for the champion. Between rounds, he told Johnson to give up, not out of cruelty, but out of honesty. He moved to 24-0, and the world finally realized the lightweight title wasn't a matter of if, but when. But the path to the gold was a minefield, and it had one name written all over it: Tony Ferguson, El Cucuy, the boogeyman of the lightweight division. 4 times the fight was booked, 4 times it collapsed. A torn knee ligament, a rare blood disorder, a freak accident involving a cable wire during a media event, and finally, a global pandemic. Each cancellation felt more devastating than the last. Fans called it the most cursed matchup in combat sports history. It remains the greatest fight that never happened. The Eagle was hungry, and the lightweight division was running out of places to hide. April 2018, UFC 223, Brooklyn. The week the world stood still. After the bus attack, where Conor McGregor hurled a metal dolly through a window, showering fighters in broken glass, McGregor was arrested, and Khabib was left without an opponent. 3 different fighters were scheduled to face him in 48 hours. Finally, Al Iaquinta stepped up on short notice. Khabib didn't care who stood across from him. He dominated Iaquinta for 5 rounds, controlling every second of the fight. He was finally the undisputed lightweight champion of the world. But the shadow of the bus attack loomed large. The grudge was personal now. The world demanded the rematch. 6 months later, at UFC 229, the biggest fight in MMA history drew 2.4 million pay-per-view buys, and Khabib delivered exactly what he had promised. He dropped McGregor with a right hand in the second round. He mauled him on the ground for 3 rounds, and in the 4th, he locked in a neck crank so tight that McGregor had no choice but to tap. What stunned the world wasn't just the submission, it was the striking. Khabib had outpunched McGregor, beating the best striker in MMA at his own game. That right hand in round 2 wasn't just a punch, it was a statement. I am better than you everywhere. When McGregor tapped, the rivalry didn't end. It exploded. Khabib leaped over the cage fence and into the crowd, igniting a post-fight brawl that shook the entire sports world. Suspensions and fines followed, but amidst the chaos, one truth was undeniable. Khabib Nurmagomedov was the undisputed king. Then, the world changed. In July 2020, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, the architect of the Eagle, the man who built champions from nothing, passed away from complications related to illness. He was 57 years old. The MMA world mourned, and many assumed Khabib's career was over. His father was his coach, his compass, his heart. How could he fight without his heart? One last time, Khabib entered the octagon. UFC 254, Fight Island, Abu Dhabi. Across from him stood Justin Gaethje, the most dangerous striker in the lightweight division. In the second round, Khabib secured a triangle choke and put Gaethje to sleep. Then he collapsed to his knees, pressed his forehead to the canvas, and wept. He had made a promise to his mother. She didn't want him to fight without his father by his side. He told her this would be the last one. And for Khabib Nurmagomedov, a man's word is the most important thing he carries. 29 wins, 0 losses. He retired as the pound-for-pound #1 fighter on the planet. No controversy, no decline, no dramatic fall from grace. He didn't leave because he was beaten. He left because he had fulfilled the vision his father had dreamt of in a small gym in Sildi, high in the mountains of Dagestan. In his final words to the world, he said he wanted to be free. He wanted to fly. And with that, the eagle left his gloves in the center of the octagon and soared.